was like, you have to use or
No.
wash.
I think we have 9 altogether. We're gonna have to buy another 10, I guess.
Oh,
It's a shame.
Bezrat Hashem, I'll bring my own tomorrow.
I guess this means this 2 years ago when we did this, there were 10 girls in this class. Baruch Hashem, we're double. Okay. We're on page 11. Page 11 in Heichaltzu, the Hebrew English edition. And
Wait, what page?
page 11.
Ooh, fresh start, okay.
So the classes today are the Lishmas Rabbi Lippman ben Yeshua and Yehudis Basafraim official, Shev Aliyah and Neshama, and the ultimate Aliyah is the Heichaltzu Ranu Sheikh Offer. Yeah. Okay, so the Mamar is about the war against Midian, and he asked a number of questions. The last question we left off was, why does he say in one part that the Nakam is against Israel? This is a war to punish them for what they did to the Yidden, or a tikkun for what they did for the Yidden. But in the other half of the pasuk, it appears to be that it's tikkun for what they did to Hashem, and specifically Shem Havaya. And the question was, why is Midian considered the enemy of Shem Havaya? And another question was, which was the last question left off with, is that Midian is not part of the 7 nations. The 7 nations, they represent all the nations of the world, which means anything in the world that's Klipa is included in these 7 nations. And Midian is not. So clearly it's not as severe as the 7 nations. So why do we say that Midian is what opposes Shem Havaya? It should be more the 7 nations rather than Midian. And now we're at the bottom of page 11. We ask another question. This is about the wording in the pasuk. Another matter that needs to be understood. The pasuk says, Heichaltzu me'itchem, arm yourselves. But what it should have said grammatically, Heichaltzu, not Heichaltzu. What is the difference? The Heichaltzu mashmu kulchem. When it says Heichaltzu, arm yourself, the implication is all the Yidden. Well, the Mashakasa mi'itchem, but when it says mi'itchem, when it says mi'itchem, it means everyone. But over here, it wasn't everyone. Not all the Yidden were required to participate in this war. Only 1,000 people from every tribe. As the pasuk itself explains clearly that it's only 1,000 people of each tribe. In fact, that's why it doesn't say kulchem. But then the grammar, the proper grammar that it should have been would be a heavenly lamema yeichaltzu heichaltzu. Umashma. So from the fact that it says yeichaltzu, it implies that it does apply to all the Yidden, which means that all the Yidden are somehow part of this war. They should all arm themselves and be prepared for this war. So which is it? Is it all the Yidden or just 1,000 and 1/12 of Klal Yisrael? Another question on the wording. It says there should be 1,000 people from each tribe. L'chol matas Yisrael, one per tribe of all the tribes of Israel. Again, heavily the Mamar, according to the proper grammar, it should have said Mikol matas, from all the tribes of Israel. What is the implication? The Chol almost again also seems to imply that all the tribes of Israel are part of this war when they're not. That's the conclusion of all the questions. And here we have the Kitzur, the summary on page 13. Inyam Lechemes Midian, Menagid the Shemavaya, that the war of Midian is a nation that they are opposed to Shemavaya, and Kush is B'lashon HaKosev. He's asking questions, specifics about the language in the pasuk, and these differences in the language, they're the ones that give us a hint of that there's a deeper meaning going on here, and that'll help us understand the whole subject. So these are the questions, and now we're going to start with page 14. We start explaining the union of Midian and the war against Midian, the way it is Beruchnis. So I'm going to be reading from the bottom under the line where it has the Hebrew English together. Follow over there, easier. Klol, the union who the general union is as follows: Midian u'Maloshin Modin u'Meriva. The word Midian, of course, it's the name of a tribe, but it also in Hebrew means and comes from the word Modin, which means strife, and Meriva is contention. Zehu calling klipas Midian. This is what defines this klipa. Shua perud v'eschalkus. It's about separation and division. We said yesterday, quite a few of you were not here yet yesterday, that every time we find in the Torah that it talks about a nation that is attacking Israel, but if it's in the Chumash, whether it's Mitzrayim, whether it's Plishtim, whether it's Amalek, whether it's Midian in this case, it's all, they were human beings, literally, Torah is speaking a literal language, but they embodied in them a certain klipa, an evil force. And each nation embodied a different klipa, different evil force. And what is it that Midian embodies is the klipa, the evil of strife and contention, machlekas. This is what we know as sinas chinam, which means baseless hate, and pirid alavavitz, which means separation of hearts, separating people one from the other. So we know that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of sinas chinam, which means the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed more for other reasons. Some say because they worshipped Avodah Zarah, and some say because they were not living a life of tznius. All different reasons that are given. But when it comes to the second Beis Hamikdash, all opinions agree that they didn't violate other areas of Torah as much. On the contrary, they observed. But where they were lacking was in Ahavas Yisrael, and that Ahavas Yisrael, there was actually sinas chinam, hate. So the famous story of the straw that broke the camel's back, what was it? What actually led to the actual destruction of the Beis Hamikdash was a story of Kamsa bar Kamsa. So even though you might say this was just an individual story, that this person hated the other person, he didn't invite him to his party, then he threw him out of the party, so he humiliated him, so he hated him, and as a result of that, he went to the emperor of Rome, and he told him that the Jews are against you, and that led to the destruction of Beis Hamikdash. But that act, the fact that this was the last act, that sort of expressed what was the general spiritual condition of Klal Yisrael at that time. It was basically say sinas chinam, and sinas chinam is not only a negative character trait; is the direct opposite of what kedusha is all about. Which means that we'd have to characterize kedusha. We would say kedusha is characterized by unity. Klipa is characterized by division. Do as it's known, this is the primary difference. What defines Kedusha and what defines Sidra Achra, the other side, the Kedusha Achdus. That Kedusha is unity. And that's what Shem Havaya is all about. And the Yichud, Shubchin is Yichud, V'skalos, B'chochmo, and Midas the Kedusha. So Kedusha is all about unity and unity in the world that starts higher up, unity amongst the spheres, that everything is united. What does it mean, unity amongst the spheres? Who's fighting with whom? So he says as follows. Even though there are 10 spheres, and in the 10 spheres, there's two categories, Meichen and Midas, intellectual spheres, and emotional spheres. Nevertheless, all these differences, and these aren't just ordinary differences, these are the differences that are the root of all the differences in creation. In other words, all the differences we see in every area of the universe, whether it's humans, whether it's animals, whether it's plants, whether it's personalities, whether it's just the Gashmis, the different things that are one different than the other in the inanimate or in the realm of Tzameach, of the plant kingdom, all the differences, the million and billion and trillions of differences, really, they're all rooted in 10 differences, which are the 10 spheres. So this is like the highest point of all differences, and yet they're all in harmony. They're all in harmony, and they include one another. And this is a result of Shem Havaya. Shem Havaya is what includes them, combines them, that they should all be united as one. That's Kedusha. The Sherish in Klipa. What's the source of Klipa? Well, the Heipach is the opposite of this. The P'chinas Pirud, it's about separation, Heichaltzu, and division. Why do we say that this defines Klipa? So he's going to explain soon. That's where Klipa comes from. That's how Klipa was born, so to speak. It came as a result of spheres that didn't have harmony, that fell apart, that broke apart because there was division. And as a result of that, Klipa came into being. So the whole essence of Klipa, where's the source and where are the roots and where is it coming from? It's coming from division, and as I'll soon explain about the world of Tohu. Yes.
We learn that the sphere of Deborah is like contraction and division, right? Like the 5 fingers and the 5 palette, and it like can make things smaller. So isn't that like separating and dividing? But is that just like
no? It's I guess there's I don't know if that's the word in English, but I think there's a difference between separation and division. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but there could be two things that are separated, but the fact that they're separated is not to divide them, not to create a distance between them. On the contrary, it's so that they could actually work even better together. In other words, in Torah, for example, as we know from other sources, everything that we have in Torah that Torah says these two things can be together is not to create division amongst people, but on the contrary, the Torah says these two people or these two things or these two, whatever it is, in order for them to be in harmony, there has to be a certain distance between them.
Let's say the end goal is the harmony.
Right, and the end goal is what defines it.
Right, so if the end goal is harmony, then the separation is...
It's not a real separation, it's not division. In other words, let's say the fact that we have 12 Shvatim, and each Shevet is different, and they're separated by their name, by their family. In Israel, they lived in different parts of the land. In the Midbar, they had to march together under a certain banner. Each banner had a different color and a different symbol. All those differences were not to make a separation between them. On the contrary, that was so that each one knew their place. It's like having in an army and saying, you're going to be, this group, they're going to be driving tanks. This group is going to be the place in the kitchen preparing food. These are the generals that are going to make the plans. These are the soldiers that are going to go out there and fight. These are the guys that are going to fly planes. Someone say, an army that's so separated, how are they going to exist? If the whole army would be all on the planes, they're not going to make it. If all the soldiers would be only in tanks, they're also not going to make it. You have to have some. So the point that you're separating them is like in the human body. The hand is different than the head, and the head is different than the heart, and the feet and the legs, and the eyes and the ears. But all those differences is what brings it all together. Division means it's taka for the purpose of just cutting off connection. We find an interesting thing that Yaakov and Esav said the same thing. They just expressed it differently, a little different way they expressed it. And that expression, which was different, is what brings out the difference between Kedusha and Klippa. What is it? Yaakov said these words, Yeshli Kol. I have everything. Esav wanted to give him something. He said, don't worry, I have what I need. I have everything. And that's the Lashon is scholars. The word everything is a language that includes. But Esav said, Yeshli Rav. I have, Rav means I have a lot. Lashon Pirud, or Lashon Ribuy or Pirud. Or another example, when Yaakov came to Mitzrayim, he had 70 family members. And what does it say? Nefesh, not nefashos. Nefesh Lashon Yachid, singular, not plural. He doesn't bring the other part, but the other part is that by Esav, where he had much less people, it does say, in the next page he has it. It says he had 6 people, and it says nefashos, plural. Why? Because Yaakov's Kedusha, even though they're 70, but they're all one. By Esav, it might be 6 only, but they're divided amongst themselves, so it's separate. By as we said before, the Besita, the Kedusha, in the realm of Kedusha, Hagam Sheyesh Esses Spheres, even though there are 10 spheres, and in the 10 itself, there's Gimel Sichlim, there's 3 which are intellectual, Chochma Bina Das, and there are 7 which are the emotional, Chesed Gevurah Teferes Netzach Ha'Yisod Malchus. 17. In fact, this is where the number 70 comes from. It says there were 70 descendants that came from Yaakov, which in a certain sense means that the source of all Jewish people, the root of all Jewish people, of course it starts with Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, and then, and here we have Yaakov, and then Yaakov had 70, and from these 70 came all the rest. Why the number 70? Shein Zayim Midas Kolechet Kol Meyud. The 70 represents that the Yidden have 7 midos, Chesed, Gvurah, Teferes. Each one of the 7 consists of all 10. So altogether, you have 70. This is the reason why sometimes we find that Yidden are also described as a nation of 7 categories. Where do we find this? First of all, we just had this by Achon Pesach, where it says when Mashiach is going to come, we're going to cross the sea, and the sea will split in how many lanes? In 70 paths, 7 paths. In Mitzrayim, it's split in 12 paths. Now we understand, 12 shvatim. But here it says 7 paths. So who's going to go where? I'm not sure. I haven't worked it out. But the 7 paths show us that the Jewish people are also categorized in 7 groups. And then the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, also which represents Klal Yisrael. That's what it says actually in Tanakh, that the menorah, that Hashem shows Zechariah a vision, a prophetic vision, a menorah of seven candles. And then it says, what's the menorah? It's the Jewish nation. Why 7? Clearly, they're divided into 7 categories. It's the 7 midas. That's where it comes from. Besides the fact, and it's also connected to the fact that the whole foundation of the Jewish people is 7. Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. So that's 7 altogether. 3 Avos and the 4 Moeds. So even though there are 7, we come in fact, that's what we saw by the menorah. The menorah had 7 branches, but they weren't allowed to make it from separate pieces of gold. It had to be one piece of gold, and they heated it up, and they formed it into a menorah. They weren't allowed to take, there's another way of doing this. Take one piece of gold, another piece of gold, you heat it up, it melts, and you bring things together. No, it had to be one solid piece of gold, and through the heat, you make it softer, and you form it, and you shape it. Why? On one hand, it's 7. On the other hand, it's one. But by Asa, by Irak, Shisha Nefashas, you only had 6. Uksiv nafshesh loshen rabim, and by him it says souls plural, because Esav is klipa, and that's what B'chinas Pirud v'Ischal, because over there everything is full of separation and divisiveness. And the reason why we have this by Esav is because that's where the source of Esav comes from. B'chenu b'sharsha. So in Chassidus, when we learn about something, in order to really get to understand what the essence is all about, we take a look at where is it coming from spiritual, because that's its source. So that'll help us define it better. Where is the source of Esav? B'chinas Svirus, the Toyu. Esav, his source is the Svirus of the world of Toyu. And the world of Toyu, b'chinas Anpin Mispardim. They were separate branches. I think that's a term that's found in the Zohar. Separate branches. Which means, and when you look at a tree, look outside and you see a tree, there are branches, but each branch is separate. They're all growing separate one from the other. That's how the spheres were. They were branches. They all came from one source, but then they separated each one separately. Which means, page 18, Shamid is the Toyu, the Midas of the world of Toyu, they couldn't tolerate one another. The Chesed, the Midah of Chesed, which is kindness, couldn't tolerate the character trait of Gevura, because Gevura is the opposite of Chesed. On the other hand, Gevura couldn't tolerate Midas HaChesed. So when you have two forces and both are very strong, and each one is pulling in a different direction, it breaks. And that's why it says, and they ruled, they reigned, and they died. So we don't have the copies yet, but I would show it to you inside. And when we get the copies, we'll go over it again, and I'll show you where it is. Yes, Nelly.
So Esau had the potential for Shuvah, but if the spirits are from the world of Tiger, how do you like unite them?
Esav's root was in Kedusha, right? But because it went through the world of Torah, there's divisiveness. But everything in the world, every person could do an Avera, and then they can transform that into Kedusha. And the reason is because the source of all Klippa is from Kedusha. There was a very strange story that happened with Esav. You all know this from the Parsha, that Yaakov was being buried in Hebron, and Esav made a big commotion, and he said, he deserves to be buried here, not Yaakov. So the argument was, no, it's not true. You sold the birthright to Yaakov, so Yaakov deserves to be buried there. Now, who says? We have a contract, it's a written contract. So where is it? It's in Mitzrayim. We left it back home. So Naphtali, who was very quick, the Gemara says he was able to run as fast as a deer. It's pretty fast. He said he'll run to Mitzrayim and he'll bring back the papers. He ran to Mitzrayim to get the papers. Dan had a son, whose name was Chushim, and he was deaf. So he didn't understand what was going on. He was asking, what's happening? Why doesn't the funeral continue? So they said to him that Esav, this Russia, he's not letting them bury Yaakov. That's what he understood. He didn't know the rest of the story. He grabbed an axe and he chopped off his head.
And it rolled into.
And the head rolled into the grave and fell on Yitzchak's feet. And Yitzchak smiled. That's what it says in the Medrash. And that's how he's buried. His head remained there and was buried there. Of course, there's a lot of depth to the story, but the way Chassidus explains it, what does it mean that his head was on Yitzchak's feet? You're focusing on the wrong parts. We're not talking about chopping heads. Let's talk
You
about.
got me excited, Rabbi.
What does it mean that his head fell on Yitzchak's foot? It means the head of Esav, the source of Esav, the origin of Esav was by Yitzchak, was in Kedusha. And
Like of his
that's what the head means,
that what he
right?
could have been.
Where he's from, and that's why he could have been. So because this, in other words, these spheres, each sphere is very forceful, very powerful, and you have a force of chesed and a force of gvura, and the other 5 as well, and each one is pulling in a literally different direction, so it fell apart. What does it mean by Yimlech Vayomes? So the source for this idea of Olam HaToyu, if you look in the Chumash, you don't see anything about that except for embraces. It says, the world was, there was chaos. and that's where it sort of alludes to the world of Tohu. But in more detail, we find in Parshas Vayishlach. Parshas Vayishlach embraces, it talks about Esau and about Esau's descendants and all the kings that came from him. And it says this and this person was a king and then he died. Then this and this person became the next king and then he died. This person came the next king and he died. So the Zohar says, what does it mean? Vayimlech, he ruled, and he died. He ruled and he died. So the Zohar says this is referring to the 7 kings of Tohu, the 7 spheres of Tohu, that they were spheros, but then there was the process which is called shviras hakelim. Everything broke, everything fell apart because they weren't able to get together. This is the famous term that's used in reference to the world of Tohu, that there was the shattering of the vessels, shviras hakelim. And that's where separation comes from. In other words, the source of klipa is a place of separation. The whole reason why it happened was because of the separation. So clearly, this is what defines and this is what characterizes klipa. Now, what does shviras hakelim mean? I think we had this more than once before, but I guess every time it comes up, it's okay to just briefly go over it again.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how do we bring the unity back? Like, how do we bring the unity back?
That's what Torah mitzvah is all about. In other words, when we do Torah mitzvahs, what happened was that everything fell, so to speak, and it became total klipa. Up there, it's still kedusha, but it became klipa. It became klipa. So by us using whatever it is, water, using food, using items, and using wool for this mitzvah and using leather for that mitzvah, we elevate the physical and we reconnect it to its original.
And then the sparks go up again.
And the fires go up again. That's Bir Nitzutz is all about. I just want to. It's Bir Nitzutz, is elevating the sparks.
Okay.
So I just want to explain the term shviras hakelim, unless someone here would like to offer an explanation. What does it mean, the breaking of the vessels?
It was when, wasn't it when it was like the light was too much for the vessels? So it's not like a full definition. It's just
That is the definition. Now the rest is just commentary.
It's when Hashem first created the world, right?
What?
It's when Hashem first created the
Right.
world.
This is something which took place in a world which is higher than Atzilus. But I used to. I was in Yeshiva Newark, New Jersey, and I remember, the Rebbe wants that Bachram should go to different shuls and give over sichas. But Bachram are a little bit new in the field of speaking, so sometimes they just give it over as it is without explaining. So this Bachram came to a shul and he was going over a sicha, and he kept talking about shviras hakelim. And then after he finishes, the president of the shul gets up and says, I didn't understand everything that this young yeshiva bachar was saying. It was too deep for me. But one thing I did understand, that all the dishes in the yeshiva broke and they really need help. So we're asking everybody to contribute with the best that they can. So what kind of expression is shviras hakelim? So the answer is that in the world of spheres, we always talk about 10 spheres, but that's general. Being more specific, every sphere consists of 2 parts. One part is called and one part is called keli. It's like saying there are 10 people in the room, but every person consists of 2 parts, a neshama and a guf. There's a soul and there's a body. In the person, the different faculties, there's the intellect, emotion, and every one of the faculties has 2 parts. That's the intellect. There's the power of intellect, which is part of the neshama, and there's the physical organ, that's flesh and blood, that contains it. That's the vessel. So even in the highest of levels, in Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, Atzilus, and here in the world of Tohu, there's 10 spheres, but they also have an aura and a keli. It's not a physical keli, and it's not even a keli that we can describe and define, but relatively is 2 parts to the sphere. What is the common denominator? If it's not physical, it means just like in the physical, the keli is what contains something much higher in it, like the brain. You can't compare the physical organ, the brain, which is flesh and blood, to the power of intellect, which is a part of a neshama, something which is just an energy, a life energy. But nevertheless, it contains it. And as a result of containing it, it allows it to function in a more limited way, allows it to function in a more organized way, in a way which it could relate to physical things. So the Maila also, the Keli is what defines it and what limits things, puts a definition to things. It shouldn't be so abstract, it should be so infinite. So if the light and the Keli, this is what we explained, they always have to be in proportion to each other. Just like Begashmis, if you put something into a Keli, it has to be the same size. If you put in more, then you'll break the Keli. If I take something and put it into this cup, and I stuff it with different things, more than the cup can handle, the cup will break. And the same with any Keli. And the same with a person. If Chas v'Shalom, a person's experiencing something emotionally that's more than they can handle, God forbid, something breaks because it's too much energy for that physical body and that physical heart to contain it. So up there,
because it's coming from such a high place, that's what you're saying?
no, I'm saying even Begashmis, let's say a person hears shocking news, Chas v'Shalom, and they faint, or even worse than that, is because the emotion that they experience is more than what their heart can handle. And the same thing with the good news could also be that way. A person could faint from good news also. Yeah.
So what's an example of when the or and the Keli are not proportional?
I just gave you an example. An example is when a person is experiencing an emotion that is very strong and very intense, and it's not in proportion to their mind and heart to be able to contain it. Now, of course, that's part of our Aveda, to make it containable, to work on it. But let's say something happens which is out of my control, and it's more than the person can handle. Like it says, let's take an example, Matan Torah. You remember Matan Torah, right? It was only 3,000 years ago. We were standing at Har Sinai and started to speak. What happened to all the Yidden? They all died. Why did they die? Because seeing Hashem and hearing Hashem's voice was so overwhelming that they couldn't handle it. Or the story we had in the Parsha, I'll get to in a second, last week's Parsha, with Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron. They were overcome with such love for Hashem, the body couldn't handle it, and they passed out. So a person, what could a person do? He's supposed to love Hashem. The answer is you have to make sure that whatever is going on inside should be controlled and not allow it to be out of control, and the Keli can handle it. In the world of Tohu, each sphere was so intense, was so strong, was so powerful that the vessels broke. But the reason why they were so powerful and the reason why they were so strong was because they didn't include each other. That we have to explain that. But had they included one another and connect to one another, it wouldn't be so strong, and they would have been able to be contained. Yes, who was just asking a question? Yeah.
I feel like I've asked this before, but like with Matan Torah, like Hashem could have made it that we could handle hearing it and not die. Like, why didn't you do that?
I guess because because Hashem wanted this very exact thing, that we should be humans with the human limited capacity, and yet at the same time receive something which is beyond our capacity. So therefore, if Hashem would have made us change, it would mean like, oh, he's making us more like angels rather than humans. Yeah.
Is that also connected to like Moshe, like having a leader, like having somebody? Because wasn't it that the Jews wanted it directly, but Moshe was trying to bring it from Hashem, and then the Jews said, we want it straight from Hashem, and then this happened. So is it like a lesson for us that we need that channel that can hold?
Right. Part of Moshe Rabbeinu's function is that an infinite light is like a process of tzimtzum, sort of. That the infinite light of Hashem should come down in a more limited way, that should be able to be contained. Yeah. But over there, it was given through Moshe. I mean, you're saying, the Yidden said, let Moshe speak. Even though when Moshe spoke, it was also Hashem. But the fact that it's being channeled through Moshe made it more containable.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
With Matan Torah, there's a debate about like changing the laws of nature, the way we didn't receive the Torah, something like with seeing the sounds. But so there's machlokes with that. But with this, Hashem didn't want to change the laws of nature. There's no debate about it. It's just.
I think, in other words, this is something more general, whether we humans could handle such a light or not. If Hashem would have changed our nature, like it says in Gemara, Hashem had two choices. One choice is to come down to Har Sinai. The other choice is to lift us and Har Sinai up there and go to him. Why does he come down to us? So the way Chassidus explained, because the whole point is Hashem wants to bring godliness down to the dwelling place in this world. So I guess if Hashem would have changed our nature, that we are able to contain something which is beyond the norm to contain, that means that we are no longer the same regular people that we are. It's like people ask a question, why does Hashem have to make a Navi like Moshe Rabbeinu or other Naviim, 1,000 great tzaddikim, and through them we hear what Hashem wants? Why can't we all get direct from Hashem? And the answer is, if we would all get direct from Hashem, it wouldn't be that Gashmi is the world that Hashem wants, human beings. The definition of a human being, an ordinary human being, is someone who can't relate to a ruchnis like that. And only angels or humans that are like angels, which is the exception. So there are two reasons that are given. It sounds like they're two separate reasons, but they're actually one. What I mean is, one reason is saying the light was too intense. The other reason is because there was no unity. But really they're one. The reason why they were so intense was because there was no unity. What does that mean? How is that explained? So I don't know if we have enough time, but let me just start and then we'll explain a bit more. To make it very, very simple, very simple. In order for me to be able to relate to someone that's very different than me, I have to be able to have something in me that allows me to relate to that. To give a simple example, there are certain people that they can't relate to children. They can't relate to children or their needs or the way they kvetch or the way they're, big deal, you got a red balloon or a blue balloon. Does it really make a difference? Tell that to a 2-year-old. He'll just cry louder. And then you explain him another philosophical explanation, how blue and red and green, they're all really interconnected. It's not such a problem. He'll scream louder. He doesn't know what you're talking about. I want a green balloon. There are people who know how to talk to children. They could relate to that and they understand it. A little child, if he builds blocks and someone knocks it down, it's like you build the Empire State Building and someone knocked it down. To him, he just built the blocks and you knocked it down. He'll be crying and hysterical. You have to buy him ice cream or gum to calm him down. Nothing else could calm him down. So there are people that can't relate to that. And then there are people who are very good with children. Why are they good? Because they could relate to the feelings of a child, even though it's so childish, but they could relate to it. How could they relate to it? Because once upon a time, they were also children. In other words, I have like a child in me, so I can relate to the child out of me. But there are people who can't because they're so out of the world of a child's world, they just can't relate to it. Just nonsense. I don't even talk to you. There's no reason why you should be crying. And they don't get it. Same thing with chesed and gevura. If I'm a chesed person, chesed, I only know chesed. Sometimes you have to be disciplined. You need gevura. If I don't have the ingredient of gevura in me at all, I can't relate to anyone or anything that's going to be gevura, even if I needed it to balance things out. And if I'm a gevura person and I feel no, the way to do it is you have to put your foot down, you have to be strong, you have to be assertive, you have to be aggressive. And someone says, maybe you have to be a bit softer and just take it easy and chesed. And two people like that could work out great if they work things out with each other to make it balanced. But if I am gevura and I can't have no chesed in me, I can't relate to the other person's chesed ideas. And then what happens is a clash. Then I pull this way, you pull that way, and everything falls apart. So that's what it means. Because there was no inclusion, because chesed didn't include gevura, and gevura didn't include chesed, each one was just pure chesed, and it's very strong, and as a result of that, everything fell apart. Okay, to be continued.
But the point is to learn from each other, to take, like you said, take the good from each side and to merge, to bring it together so that you have that balance.
Right, of course. Yeah. Yes.
Are we reading today later?
What?
Are we reading later?
I think it's still on the calendar. Yeah.
When did you get it? Yeah.